Punjabi Hari. Gopijana Balabha Girivara Radhe. Gopijana Balabha Girivara Radhe. Jatsodhanandana Brajachanuranjana. Jatsodhanandana Brajachanuranjana. Jamuna Tiravanam Chadi. Jamuna Tiravanam Chadi. Jaya Radha Madhava Punjabi Hari. Hava Punjabi Hari. Jaya Radha Madhava Punjabi Hari. Madhava Punjabi Hari. Gopi Jana Balabha Girivara Dhani. Balabha Girivara Dhani. Gopi Jana Balabha Girivara Dhani. Ahaba Girivara Dhani. Jatsodhanandana Brajachanuranjana. Jatsodhanandana Brajachanuranjana. Jamuna Tiravanam Chadi. Jamuna Tiravanam Chadi. Jaya Radha Madhava Punjabi Hari. Jaya Radha Madhava Punjabi. Jaya Radha Madhava Punjabi Hari. Madhava Punjabi Hari. Jaya Vishnupad Paramahamsa Harivedagacharya Astatarasatasi Srimad His Divine Grace Easy Bhakti Vedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Gaura Premanandi. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. We're back again with a continuation of Uddhava Gita, as you see on the screen. Let me show you something. It's really nice. This is the work of Shruti Mangara. Check it out. Watch the screen close. Whoops. Wait a minute. Went the wrong direction. Okay, there we go. Ta-da! Canto 10, Canto 11, Chapter 10, text number 9. Just as fire may appear differently as dormant manifest, weak, brilliant, and so on, according to the condition of the fuel. Similarly, the spirit soul enters a material body and accepts particular bodily characteristics. So the context is Krsna, speaking to Uddhava, is now giving some lessons on how to properly understand and apply what was heard from the Avadhuta Brahman. The Avadhuta Brahmana was teaching Jnana Vairagya, knowledge of the material, detachment from the material, attachment to the spiritual. Jnana Vairagya. And so how to get to that place, the application is this section. It's still Sankhya, meaning there's spirit and there's matter, and they are quite distinct. And to help us make that distinction, Krishna is giving different examples or teachings. This is the soul is different than the body, and by using the metaphor of fire that's within wood. As fire within wood manifests differently, so souls manifest different bodies according to the conditioning or the contamination or the covering of the soul. The body is just the representation of that covering, and the soul is distinct. And so focus on the soul, not the covering. That's the idea here. Bhaktisiddhanta's translation of this verse: just as fire manifested from wood takes different shapes according to the condition of the fuel, the bodied soul enters various material bodies and thus accepts varieties of bodily characteristics. So one's swadharma, one's psychophysical nature, is just a covering. And we may honor that psychophysical covering and act accordingly, and yet at the same time we should understand we're different. And the whole system of varnashram, which is recognizing differences of coverings and duties according to the differences of coverings, the purpose isn't just do those duties. It's act in accord with nature to elevate the consciousness of the soul to realize who we are. Okay, here's the BBT purport. Although fire may appear and disappear within a particular object, the element fire always exists. Similarly, the eternal soul appears within a suitable body and then disappears from that body, but the soul always exists. Just as fire is different from its fuel, the soul is different from the body. A match makes a tiny fire, whereas the explosion of a huge gasoline tank will send flames shooting up into the sky. But still, fire is one. Similarly, one spirit soul may appear in the body of Brahma and another in the body of an ant. We're going to see a picture of Brahma and an ant. It's a good one. But the spirit soul is qualitatively the same in every body. Because of ignorance, we impose the bodily characteristics upon the soul. And thus we say that a particular person is American, Russian, Chinese, African, or Mexican, or that he is old or young. Although such designations certainly apply to the body, they do not apply to the spirit soul, which is described here as para, or a transcendental entity. It's Bhagavad Gita 201. Krishna speaking 101 in Bhagavad Gita. And to Uddhava it's 201. It's the same. It doesn't change. As long as the bewildered spirit soul remains inimical to the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the designations of the gross and subtle bodies will wrap themselves around him, keeping him in darkness. If one intellectually identifies with various materialistic philosophies of life, he becomes covered by the subtle mind. Ultimately, everything that exists is part and parcel of the absolute truth, Lord Krsna. When the living entity realizes this, he becomes nirupadi, nirupa and upadi. Upadi designation, nirupa, rupa, nirupa, without the covering of some designation, liberated state, or free from material designations. This is his constitutional position. And Bhaktisiddhanta's purport, short, fire, although separate from the object it burns, appears in various ways as big, small, blazing, or extinguished, according to the condition of the fuel. In the same way, the spirit soul, being averse to the Supreme Lord, identifies himself with his gross and subtle bodies, although he is distinct from them and eternal. So the operative principle is how you regard Krishna, and that's going to determine whether you're covered or not covered, and the type of covering, and it has everything to do with how you regard Krishna. Paraphrasing Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur's commentary, he writes, Bhaktisiddhanta, although fire may sometimes be visible and sometimes not, the element fire always exists. Similarly, the soul may appear within a body and then disappear, but still the soul is eternal. It is a mistake to impose material conditions upon the spirit soul, who has nothing to do with the material body. As fire is sometimes blazing, sometimes great, sometimes small, sometimes extinguished, the spirit soul is sometimes born, sometimes in the body of Brahma, sometimes in the body of an ant, and sometimes departs from the body at death. And then the actual commentary of Vishwanath reads, just as one mistakes the qualities of wood, such as its tendency to be destroyed, to be those of fire, though the qualities of wood do not actually reside in fire, one mistakes the qualities of the body, such as its perishable nature, to be those of the soul. Fire entering wood seems to assume the qualities like destruction. The Atma is para, is entering the body, assumes qualities of the body, such as destruction, out of man's misconception. So, the soul is eternal, and the elements, the Panchabhuta, actually all 24 elements, the Panchabhuta, we'll start with that, they're not temporary. They're sometimes manifest, sometimes withdrawn. So after a fire, where does the fire go? The element still exists. It takes shelter elsewhere, but the element fire still exists. It's an interesting concept. Like the Ishopanishad verse, that the air of life emerge with the totality of air, and the elements go back to the reservoir of elements. So in the fire, supposing there's a firewood, and you burn the firewood, so the fire's over, right? Fire still exists. It's just taken shelter elsewhere, and it's just one of those elements that it may manifest or not manifest. Maybe big, maybe small. Similarly, the soul, like fire was in the wood, the soul is within the body, And when the body is finished, the soul moves on to another place. It's interesting. Very interesting. The philosophy, it's a technical term, but it's pretty simple. Shakti Parinamavad. It's said about Vyasadev's teaching is the absolute truth has shaktis or potencies, and the potencies are simply transforming from one to another to another. Parinama. Parinama means transformation. Transformation of state. Not so dissimilar from what Albert Einstein had to say. Energy is neither created nor destroyed. It can be transformed from this to that. So what's the shelter or the original source of all those energies? That's Shaktiman. The Atma, Para, entering the body assumes qualities of the body such as destruction out of man's misconception. Just as fire is said to take various forms, such as birth, death, small or big, the Atma is said to take birth and die. Though there is many different, although there are many different jivas, one jiva, such as the Devata, attains variety by accepting various types of bodies one after another or simultaneously. I don't know what that sentence means. Though there are many different jivas, one jiva, such as a devata, attains variety by accepting various types of bodies, one after another, or simultaneously. I don't know the or simultaneously, so don't ask me what does that mean. Okay, so we can go to our screen and see some nice images. Just as fire may appear differently as dormant, manifest, weak, brilliant, and so on, according to the condition of the fuel, similarly the spirit soul enters one material body and accepts particular bodily characteristics. Next, here's the ant in Brahma. Just as fire is different from its fuel, fire is different from its fuel. The soul, so fire is stored within the fuel, but it's different from the fuel. It's different from the fuel. The soul is different from the body. A match makes a tiny fire, whereas the explosion of a huge gasoline tank will send flames shooting up into the sky, but still fire is one. Similarly, one spirit soul may appear in the body of Brahma, and another in the body of an ant. But the spirit soul is qualitatively the same in every body, or in everybody. Interesting. And here's another nice graphic. As long as the bewildered spirit soul remains inimical to the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the designations of the gross and subtle bodies will wrap themselves around him, keeping him in darkness. Now, I don't know where she comes up with these drawings, but good. She's learning a lot just by making these slides. She meditates on and then illustrates. It's a nice absorption. Okay, moving on to text 10. The subtle and gross material bodies are created by the material modes of nature, which expand from the potency of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Material existence occurs when the living entity falsely accepts the qualities of the gross and subtle bodies as being his own factual nature. This illusory state, however, can be destroyed by real knowledge. This is the theme again. Jnana Vairagya. Let's say, supposing you don't have Gyan, you're not going to have Vairagya. You can say, I don't care, or, all these slogans. No fear, don't tread on me. As long as there's a bodily conception, there's fear. And attachment, because fear arises from attachment. Okay. Bhaktisiddhanta's translation: the subtle and gross material bodies are created by the material modes of nature. It sounds like BBT copied him, which are creations of the illusory energy of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Material existence occurs when the living entity falsely accepts the qualities of the gross and subtle bodies as being his self. This illusory state, however, can be destroyed by real knowledge. Almost the same. Here's the BBT purport. Regarding the analogy comparing fire and its fuel to the soul and the body, one may argue that to some extent fire is dependent upon its fuel and cannot exist without it. Someone could argue, since we do not experience the existence of fire independent of fuel, one may therefore still question, how is it possible for the living entity to exist separately from the body, become covered by it, and eventually become free from it? Only through the Supreme Personality of Godhead's knowledge potency, or vidya, can one clearly understand the nature of the living entity. By vidya, or real knowledge, one may cut material existence to pieces and, even in this lifetime, experience spiritual reality. According to Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, our material existence is an artificial imposition. Upadhi, right? Material existence. By the Lord's inconceivable potency of nescience, or ignorance. So the antidote to nescience is knowledge. So by the Lord's inconceivable potency of nescience, the qualities of gross and subtle material forms are psychologically imposed upon the living being, and because of misidentification with the body, the living entity initiates a series of illusory activities. As explained in the previous chapter, the present material body is like a tree that produces the karmic seed of the next body. However, this cycle of ignorance can be cut to pieces by the transcendental knowledge explained by the Lord. Paragraph. Unfortunately, the conditioned souls, being inimical to the Supreme Personality of Godhead, do not accept the perfect knowledge spoken by the Lord. Instead, they remain absorbed in gross and subtle illusion. But if the living entity accepts the Lord's knowledge, his whole situation can be rectified and he can return to his original eternal blissful life of perfect knowledge in the direct association of the Lord. And Bhaktisiddhanta's purport is very short. Those living entities who are averse to the Supreme Lord forget their constitutional position and become conditioned by material existence, so that they consider their gross and subtle bodies as their self. However, a pure spirit soul is not bewildered by material existence, which keeps the rebellious souls under a spell of illusion. So, same point being repeated, which is how you regard Krishna has everything to do with what your consciousness is, covered or not covered, and the types of covering. Say it again. How you regard Krishna, or don't, is going to determine your spiritual identity or your material covering and the identification with it. Viparya yo smritihi. One forgets. Smriti disappears. And instead, forgetfulness appears. And where does that remembrance or forgetfulness come from? Supersoul. So Supersoul knows how we regard him, and he reciprocates how we regard him. It's very friendly. And if we want to have an attitude, he'll comply. Okay. You don't want to see me? Okay. You want this? Okay. Sure. It's not recommended, but... So then, to get out of that, so it's knowledge, but specifically knowledge of Krishna. Not just knowledge of technology. That's, in the language of Ishopanishad, that's another type of avidya. Minus connectivity with the personality of Godhead, it's another avidya, it's another covering. One can be really sophisticatedly covered. So there's nothing wrong with that knowledge, it's just forgetfulness of Krishna that's problematic. Okay. Bhaktisiddhanta's gloss of Vishwanath's commentary. The question may arise that since fire is produced from wood and fire has never been seen independently of any fuel, it may be assumed that the existence of the soul is dependent upon the gross and subtle material bodies. The answer is that through the Supreme Personality Godhead's knowledge potency, vidya, one can clearly understand the nature of the living entity. By such real knowledge, one may cut material existence to pieces and even in this lifetime experience spiritual reality. Our material existence is an artificial imposition. By the Lord's inconceivable potency of nescience, the quality of gross and subtle material forms are imposed upon the living being, and because of misidentification with the body, he initiates a series of illusory activities, which is, the BBT translators just very nicely presented what Bhaktisiddhanta presented of Vishwanath. But we're just taking a look at different perspectives on the same topic. Final paragraph. When, by the mercy of the Lord, the conditioned souls are free from the material conception of life, having revived their original consciousness, they become free from material bondage. And here is Vishwanath's actual commentary. Quote, it's a question. Fire takes on the qualities of wood by contact with wood. How does the Atma have a relation with the body and its qualities when it does not mix with them? How does one destroy that relationship? Question mark. Answer. The subtle body and the gross body are made of Maya's gunas, which are dependent on the Lord, Purushasya. The cycle of birth and death, samsara of the jiva, means bondage to those bodies, though they do not have a relationship. The bodies are imposed on the jiva. The imposition of the body on the jiva takes place by the inconceivable Shakti called avidya, or ignorance. Complete bondage near nibbandha occurs. Bandha is bondage, nibbandha is complete bondage. Because of this complete bondage, his vidya Shakti, by the Lord's mercy, is destroyed, is the destroyer of that bondage of the jiva. So it's, there's a lot of emphasis or glorification, or, there's the door. And if you want out, there's the door. You can't stay in ignorance and, stop the material sufferings and conditions. It doesn't matter how smart, how good, how austere, how this and that and the other. You won't get out. You can rise and fall, but you can't get out. Okay, so now here comes the curtain opening again. Here's text 10, and I didn't go through and make the letters bigger. So I hope you can read what the letters say. The subtle and gross material bodies are created by material modes of nature, which expand from the potency of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Material existence occurs when the living entity falsely accepts the qualities of the gross and subtle bodies as being his own factual nature. This illusory state, however, can be destroyed by real knowledge. So I guess that's the ocean of material existence in the background. And there's different species and forms of life, higher and lower, and so forth. Here's another. Even the transitions are good. She's good. According to Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, our material existence is an artificial imposition by the Lord's inconceivable potency of nescience. The qualities of gross and subtle material forms are psychologically imposed upon the living being, and because of misidentification with the body, the living entity, what's that word? Initiates a series of illusory activities. As explained in the previous chapter, the present material body is like a tree. So there's the tree image that produces the karma seed of the next body. We heard that in the previous chapter. It was one of the gurus of the Avaduta Brahman was the tree and the seed of the tree. Because the seeds of the tree are produced from the tree, and it produces the next tree. Therefore, another nice image. Therefore, by the cultivation of knowledge, one should approach the Supreme Personality of Godhead situated within oneself. By understanding the Lord, the Lord's pure transcendental existence, one should gradually give up the false vision of the material world as independent reality. Now, sitting in a nice situation like that, one might think this is great. It's an independent reality that I like. But transcendental knowledge doesn't make that trick. So here's firewood. The spiritual master. Well, this is the next one, text 12. What happened? That was 11. Well, we didn't even do 11 yet. Okay, so we'll do 11. Therefore, by the cultivation of knowledge, one should approach the Supreme Personality of Godhead situated within oneself by understanding the Lord's pure, transcendental existence. One should gradually give up the false vision of the material world as independent reality. That's the image on the screen. Bhaktisiddhanta's translation, short. Therefore, after careful consideration, one should approach the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who is the cause and effect of everything, while renouncing the false conception that this world is an independent reality. You know, the independent reality idea, does that ring any bells as far as the Chatur Shloki verses of the Bhagavatam is concerned? One of the 4 essential verses of the whole Srimad Bhagavatam says this, and it says, seeing something that has value, that's the language used in that verse, or an existence independent, value or existence independent of its source, Krishna. Know that vision, that's the illusory energy. So illusory energy, as we are hearing, imposed upon the jiva. The illusory energy is imposed upon the jiva because of a bad attitude toward Krishna. So okay, you don't have to see Krishna. Here's the illusory energy imposed upon you, and the illusory energy says, "Oh, there's something of value, or here's something of substance. Here's meaningfulness. Here's a purpose of life. Here's an enjoyable object," or anything that's existing separate from the Supreme. That's the illusory potency. That's what this is saying. That it has some independent reality. That's the illusory energy, Maya. The BBT purport for this verse: the word yatha kramam, step by step, means that after first realizing oneself to be different from the gross material body, one should then progressively detach oneself from the material mental activities. In this verse, etad vastu buddhim, vastu buddhim, means seeing the material world as existing independently, rather than correctly seeing all things as emanations of the absolute truth. Paragraph. When one correctly identifies oneself as eternal spiritual form, one achieves the real fruit of knowledge. The Lord is eternally manifest in his eternal form, and the living entity is similarly manifest in his eternal form as the loving servitor of the Lord. When we falsely assume that temporary illusory material objects are real, knowledge of our eternal spiritual form is covered by ignorance. If, however, one meditates upon the Lord's supreme presence within everything, one can return to the normal blissful state of spiritual life. Every human being should seriously endeavor to understand the absolute truth that indicates, as indicated in this verse, by the word jigyasaya. I'm just reading this reminded of what yesterday evening, Lord Shiva said to Sati. The reason I didn't stand to offer respect, one of the reasons, to Daksha when he came into the assembly, is I'm always meditating upon Lord Vasudeva, who's in the heart of everyone. So some persons who identify in terms of the body, they offer respect appropriate for higher peer or subordinate persons in different ways. And that's a nice etiquette. It's a nice etiquette. But for one like me that just is always meditating on and seeing the super soul within, that etiquette is not an obligation. But Daksha didn't understand that. And so he criticized me unjustly. Now, persons who are in that transcendental position, they may, and later Daksha did, offer his respect to Brahma. Not just because he's daddy, but because of his exalted spiritual position. In any case, social etiquettes and so forth are the ornament. This is from one of the discussions we had, the whole theme over this past Memorial Day weekend. Etiquette is an ornament, a bhushanam. It's an ornament of a Vaishnava. So Vaishnava is decorated with etiquettes, proper sadachar. However, if a Vaishnava like Lord Shiva doesn't observe such an etiquette, it's not a fault. If they're absorbed in transcendental meditation, it's not a fault. Anyway, purport by Bhaktisiddhanta. When one comes to the platform of self-realization, next, he should inquire about his duty and then dedicate himself to the service of the Supreme Lord. While engaging in devotional service, one should remain detached from thoughts of enjoying the objects of the senses, which are all creation of Maya. You know, this is one of the things that happens. The forgetfulness of the devotee is, what should I do? And someone gets the understanding, okay, this is what I should do. Then they forget Krishna, and they forget the knowledge even, and they forget the source of that knowledge, the distributor of that knowledge, and they run off in the doership mode. And what happens? Forgetfulness. There's a temporary relief from this kind of forgetfulness, and you enter another kind of forgetfulness, and you're in the soup again. What happened? It goes on over and over. In the transition stage, in the liminal space stage, where we're not there yet, stage, we get some knowledge and we feel like that's good. And then we forget everything. We get into doership mode and we're covered again. Like, what happened? And it goes on, and there must be something wrong with the process. And not something wrong with the process. Something wrong with how we're applying ourselves to the process. It's the same disease, just taking a different shape. The disease of turning our attention away from Krishna disease. So how do you keep, while engaging in devotional service, one should remain detached from thoughts of enjoying the objects of the senses, which are all creations of Maya. The independent enjoyment mood, that's our disease. It's what brings us here, which keeps us here. Very stubborn. We want to enjoy, nothing wrong with, but in what way? How to apply that I want to enjoy quality. It's of the soul. And joy in relation to Krishna, that's the solution. Well, I'm a conditioned soul, I like to enjoy. And so, it doesn't work out. It is only due to lack of inquisitiveness that a foolish person fails to attain knowledge of the absolute truth. Vishwanath's commentary, paraphrased by Bhaktisiddhanta, the spirit soul is covered by gross and subtle bodies. One should understand that the spirit soul is completely distinct from these gross and subtle material bodies. Gradually, on the strength of one's sadhana, one should rise above the conception of that the material body is the self. And here's Vishwanath's commentary, real short, and we're done. It's one long sentence. Knowing the Atma, completely untouched, param, situated within the gross and subtle bodies, by careful analysis, one should gradually give up material thinking in relation to the body by increasing sadhana. So there's the how-to, in case you want to know, because lots of times people ask. And how to support our sadhana. Good association. Let's see if there's some discussion. Quarter after. We'll go online.
Sachit Sutta Prabhu's question. Is the next body immediately available for the soul at the time of death? If that's the case, when the soul takes the new body, how is the soul experiencing heaven or hell for its activities with the new body, which may be in a different location?
The answer is yes, and the answer is through the senses. How do we know where we are right now? One acquires a set of senses. It's right in Bhagavad Gita, built around the mind. The mind goes, and then senses are, affixed or assigned to or awarded to the soul and the mind, and through the senses we know where we are, heaven or hell. If you don't have senses, what are you going to do? So you get a body with senses. Next. That's it. Anything here?
Hare Krishna Maharaj, two things occurred to me.
I'm going to try to encourage everybody to not begin speaking by saying because I just said it. Note, when everybody speaks, commonly, the first sound that comes out is It's not om. Check it out. I got into it with Radha, and she was giggling every time I started to say and then she giggled. She'd take the microphone and try again, and then giggle because she was just conditioned to say Go ahead, try.
The comparison of the fuel existing without any connection with the body as it is. The fuel, the fire existing without.
The which?
The fire existing.
The fire.
Existing without any connection with the fuel. Same thing, same comparison is made that just as the sky exists everywhere, the soul exists in the body also without any attachment to the body. And the sky doesn't mix with anything in the whole universe. Like that, the soul doesn't mix with the body also. I just thought the two are similar when we were going through that one.
Yes, they are similar.
Yes. And then the one question I had was...
The air of life merged with the totality of air.
Yeah.
So it's not that it goes out of existence.
Yeah.
Okay.
Then the fire that Sati Devi, she burned her, immolates herself.
Yes.
Is that same fire that Dhritarashtra through Ashtanga Yoga?
Yeah.
Also, it's the
exactly.
same. It's the same.
Exactly.
Thing, yeah.
And most people don't know how to do it, but they did.
So it is accessing the fire within our body, is it?
Yeah, it's something like that. There's fire within, and you can somehow that when that becomes concentrated, the body burns.
Okay.
Vedavati did the same.
Okay.
Right?
Okay.
Same.
Yeah.
So, commonly people don't go to yoga classes to learn how to burst their body with fire. But some people know how to do that. It's the fire within the body that's stored there.
Okay.
Okay?
Thank you, Maharaj. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, Guru Maharaj. My question My question is regarding the impression slide that you shared, and then the
Regarding the
impressions that we carry.
impressions, okay.
And so I was thinking, like, since time immemorial, we are carrying impressions of our own, our psychophysical nature, as well as will be daughter or son or a child or a kid, like, in any body I may be in previous lives, I'll be carrying or maybe inheriting the impression from my parents as well.
Yes,
So it feels sometimes very
victims.
demotivating. It's like, so much endeavor we have to do to, wipe out this. I mean, how do we?
well, knowledge and detachment, and then bhakti, and then that place, the file cabinet that stores all those impressions dissolves. The impressions and the file cabinet, that's the mind. It dissolves. So it's cleansed by detachment. So supposing you don't detach, you're scripted. That's the prison. Like it or not, you're in prison. How to get in prison? How to get out of prison? It has everything to do with attitude towards the personality of Godhead, and that brings us to the prison. And so develop a proper attitude in service, and one can get released. And so the release is the impressions. As when consciousness rises, the impressions don't rule. Like somebody was asking a question. It's called in ISKCON, impure reminiscence. I remember when I hurt somebody and something. And it just pops up in the mind, right in the middle of, who knows where that came from. It's just an impression, using the phrase, and then the photo file comes up, and you see and you feel something. For the devotee, it's regret. I've misused, but then in higher consciousness, you're in this other space, it doesn't rule your life. Supposing you're not in higher consciousness, it rules your life. And then eventually the impressions are cleansed away, and the photo file is gone. The material mind, gone. And then pure devotional service begins, where it's just the spiritual mind. We don't hear about the previous lives of the cowherd boys thinking, gosh, I remember way back when I did all these silly things, or etc., etc. They're fully, so that's the fully spiritual position. It's burned, it's gone. It's no longer around, those impressions. And so then there's the in-between space. And we're scripted. It's how the machine works. Very subtle machine. We can't get out on our own. It's not just by being a good person, and the impression program stops. We're making choices as impressions come, like the Ajamila example. He saw, and there was an impression, he couldn't get rid of the impression. He tried his Brahminical things, and couldn't get rid of it, so then the impression ruled his life, and he started acting on the impression. So good people can also become victims of bad association. So, anyway, the impression predominance can be, cleansed. And then eliminated. Next, do you have something else? Okay, someone else in the back there? Button.
Hare Krishna Maharaj. Hare Krishna Maharaj. We talk.
Don't mind me, I'm just a pest.
We talk of forgetfulness. Forgetfulness, as we understand, is not remembering our real identity and forgetting our relationship with Krishna.
Correct.
And then there is this day-to-day, there is this memory, like in our day-to-day affairs.
Yes.
Where some people are good at remembering things and some people are not.
Yes.
So is that the memory thing a reflection on that?
No.
No.
It has to do with the modes of nature and endowments that come from Supersoul, material endowments that come from Supersoul. Some people can sing. Some people can't sing for anything. And they sit in the front row and they're really loud, usually. But, you know, gifts that are given by Krishna, that's in some, it's remembrance, but it's not the same as forgetfulness and remembrance of Krishna. That's fundamental, primordial of the soul. It's not something material that comes and it goes. Okay?
Thank you, Maharaj. That was very helpful.
Okay. Something else in the back there? No?
Hare Krishna, Guru Maharaj. I just want to understand the statement that this independent enjoyment, independent enjoyment mood is our disease. So the enjoyment is not, it's for the soul.
Independent is the key word.
So the enjoyment that we get from serving Krishna,
That's fine.
that is acceptable.
Not only acceptable, it's who we are.
And that we receive through doing sadhana practice and good
Yeah,
association.
we revive it through practicing serving. And practicing serving cleanses and awakens. And it's not easy to the cleansing because we're conditioned or prone to the independent type, even as we're doing sadhana. That's the
Thank you.
Okay. Over on this side, anyone? No? Okay. Premananda, you have something? Okay.
One more thing I thought of asking Maharaj, the impressions that we carry.
Impressions
that
topic
we
again,
carry.
okay.
We go on thinking our children are our children even when they are become adults.
Even they what?
When they become adults, they are still thinking we are they're
course.
very kids for us.
They're passing it on.
Yeah, so that even in the Ramayana, we see the mothers, when Rama comes back from the forest, also they feel so, I mean, they're eternally mothers for him, and they have that motherly affection shining through. Even when he returns from the forest, I mean, he's so will this motherly affection for the child, is it kind of will it I mean that I am the soul, will it mask that I am the soul and is eternal servant of Krishna, and that
Well, supposing you're a gopi in your spiritual form, are you going to feel motherly towards Krishna?
yes.
I don't think so.
So
Supposing you're a cowherd boy in the spiritual world, you're going to feel motherly towards Krishna?
yes. So,
It's the same as this impressions topic.
okay.
When they have a tendency to impressions, and when you keep becoming mother and mother and mother and mother, but the spiritual identity may or may not be. It's not determined by your material impressions and affinities according to those material impressions.
Okay.
Okay?
Okay.
All
Thank you.
right. Online something? Okay.
This is from Amara Mataji. Mind and intelligence are categorized in separated material energies of Krishna. The knowledge we are acquiring that is processed by our mind and intelligence. But the soul is Satchidananda. I desire to understand how this knowledge that is taken and processed by the mind, applied by the intelligence, helps the soul to receive enlightenment.
She wants the technology. What does she want?
I don't know.
You don't know. So I'd like to be responsive to her question, but I'm not sure what she's, I could say something, but I'd like to send in another clarification text, Amara, so we know what you want. Next.
Another question from Amara Mataji. I wanted to understand that if Krishna gives according to our inclinations, but psychophysical nature is external, then how does the forgetfulness, how the forgetfulness comes even when we desire and pray to always remember Him?
By conditioning. We're desiring and praying and we're heavily conditioned. Like, it's cloudy today. The sun is shining, but it's cloudy today. So the sun doesn't shine through fully. But it's partly sunny. And yesterday was rainy. So, our conditioning is what prevents us from fulfilling what your nice prayer says.
This is from Snehavalli Mataji. You mentioned that the soul gets the next body right after death. I heard that the soul undergoes training about the characteristics of the next body. For example, like Indra, when took the body of the pig, he behaved like the pig. So how can we understand this?
There's no contradiction. That's how we can understand it. That example of Indra getting the body of a pig is not, that specific example is not there, but Bhagavad Gita chapter 13 text 21 explains, when you get the body of a demigod, you behave like a demigod. When you get the body of a dog, you behave like a dog. You wag your tail and bark and chew on bones. When you get a dog, you don't have to go to school to learn those things. When you get the body, you behave according to the body. Ducks quack. They don't have to go to duck school. Get trained up how to quack. This morning, the birds were singing very nicely. They didn't go to singing school. They just, so, the conception that you just presented, that there's some period of training before you do something, I'm unfamiliar with that period of training before you do something. You get the body and you behave according to the body. The covering is there, the ignorance is there, the knowledge is there, whatever it is, according to the body, and you behave.
This is from Hema Mataji from India. When the soul leaves the body and gets the next body, but if I'm continuously remembering and missing, so when the soul left the body and gets the other body, but if I am continuously remembering and missing that person who left, is my grief going to bother that person?
No. there's a group of devotees in India, their mother died and they're struggling.
So this is from Amara Mataji
Clarification.
clarification. I seek understanding on how this connection of spirit soul and material mind and intelligence maintained, and the soul receives enlightenment through the material sources.
Well, it acts on the soul. You can have some instruments that are, when proper alignment is there and purification, spiritualization, purification of those instruments, then that's the methodology. But the higher sense is acting directly on the soul. Supposing, for example, Amara, supposing you hear Prabhupada explain Bhagavad Gita, and supposing you don't understand it, some particular point, is still acting on the soul. Just that sound vibration is acting on the soul. And there's spiritualization of the senses. The ear, the mind, which is one of the senses, and trying to understand the intelligence, exactly what Krishna says, one is worshiping him with his intelligence by studying the sacred conversation. So you haven't understood yet, but it's already acting on the soul, and the instruments of acquiring knowledge are becoming purified by that process. And gradually, one will come to understand. Okay. Srila Prabhupada ki jai.